speak on and discuss the chaos going on. You can try to hide from it if you want to be like an ostrich and put your head in the sand. But it's pretty evident that there's a lot of chaos going on in today's world. So I feel like it's important that we address that sometimes. Maybe we can start by just like loosening things up a little bit with like before we jump in to like, so how about that chaos and destruction going on? If everyone just wants to like go around, tell me your name and what is a simple thing that brings you joy every day? Something simple. Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. Morning. My name is Ari. And one simple thing that brings me joy that comes to mind is that I like going jogging along the East River. It's a daily ritual for me.
Great. Nice to see you again, Ari.
My pleasure as always.
Yes.
Everyone, my name is Sammy, and I would say the simplest thing that brings me joy is the sense of community. Yes, and whatever that means. Sometimes during the day it's kind of like it's with other people, with new people, with people.
Wonderful. Thanks, Sammy.
Awesome. And something I've been to share every Saturday, like today, me and my neighbor go get coffee together.
Oh, yeah. Simple rituals. But that again comes back to community in the sense of like, it's not just about, you can get coffee every day. But yeah, that's nice. Thank you.
A simple joy. I have this really cute dog that tends to wake me up every morning.
A dog?
A dog.
Okay.
She every morning spits her face in mine, and that's how I wake up. So
Wonderful. And then, again, that comes back to that sense of like sharing love with someone, whether it's in a human body or an animal body. Yeah. Thank you.
it's not to say the same thing. My dog.
Aw.
My dog. She's sometimes very naughty, but then she makes the cutest face. So I can't do better.
Yeah, how can someone be mad at someone that's so cute? Reminds me of someone I know as well. What's your name? Emilio. Okay, cool. And what's something that brings you joy?
For me, it's riding a motorcycle. I'm down here today. It's very calming. It puts me in a meditative state because I have to always pay attention around me. I don't really have time to like overthink. So that's the thing that I enjoy the most right now.
Interesting. I've never ridden a motorcycle, but I feel like for me that would be really stressful. No, that would be really stressful for me. Maybe if you were driving the motorcycle. But that's interesting that something for one person brings them joy and meditate and a meditative state might stress someone else out. So, and that's okay. So yeah. So what's your name?
Hi, my name is May.
May, cool.
And yeah, definitely like just like community every day brings me joy. If it's not like a little interaction on the street, it'll be listening to recordings of guitar. So I'm still
Cool. What's your name, Emily?
Hi. And one thing that brings me joy is seeing people smile. So I'm selfishly so happy to see everybody today. Right? Oh.
Just kidding.
No smile.
What's your name?
Marta.
Marta?
Yeah, I played here before about a few weeks ago. Emily was in the talk.
Cool.
Came back and watched this anyway. but they were giving out t-shirts, and I decided to wear it today. I was like, I'm going to Soul Talk, I'm gonna wear my shirt.
Oh, yeah.
One thing that brings me joy is a service for others, helping other people. I
Wonderful.
try to do that, like, even just holding a door, but doing something.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, that's something that brings me a lot of joy too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. What's your name?
My name is Jenna.
Jenna.
And daily ritual that brings me joy is just to walk outside, and I always listen to a podcast when I do that. So I always make it into a way to learn something new every day.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, it's nice. Thanks for allowing me to get to know you guys a little bit more, and I look forward to spending the next, hour, 15, hour and a half with you guys, whatever. Is anyone here at Soul Talks for the first time? Okay, so we have a couple. Okay, just wondering. Thanks for coming. And so today's topic, I actually forget. Me and the organizer went back and forth a million times with like what exactly the title of the talk, but so I can't even remember what we landed on. Something along the lines of like, how to find inner peace during with so much war and chaos going on, something along the lines of that. So I mean, I'm guessing everyone here knows about how there's possible world war looming, and even before that, there's COVID, and there's always fights going on between countries, between families, between neighbors, between people that are supposed to be friends. There's always war, either on like a small level or a large level. And then we've got our inner wars, the inner battles that go on in our minds and our hearts. So there's chaos in this world. And so I wanted to kind of just start with the topic of how do you deal with that? So some of the things that you guys have mentioned are some of the ways in which that you deal with it, because it's like obviously the question of what brings you joy, what's a little something that brings you joy. So one of the ways we deal with war and chaos is that we try to look for things that bring us joy, which is actually natural. It's explained in like the ancient Vedic literatures that it's the nature of the soul to seek pleasure, to seek joy. And so there's nothing wrong with that. Of course, some of the ways in which we seek joy may cause harm to others. And so that can cause issues and it can cause wars if the way that you seek joy is in a destructive way. But it's natural for us to actually be seeking joy. It's explained, says Anandamayo Bhasha in Sanskrit, that it's the nature of the Atma, or the soul, the heart, to look for joy and pleasure. So I was wondering if any of you guys wanted to share, maybe on a deeper level, how do you deal with war and chaos? Whether it's like, if you want to discuss like on the big level of like what's going on in the world, or just like in your little world's level, it's up to you. How do you, what are some of the different ways you deal with that? No, it's fine. It'll dry.
I would say just expressing your vulnerability to other people. Sometimes when you're scared or something like that, don't try to hide it. Just let yourself feel it.
I appreciate that. I was just having a random conversation with someone on the subway a couple of days ago about vulnerability. And he was like, I don't know if I agree with the idea of encouraging people to be vulnerable, because you can be taken advantage of in your vulnerability. Yeah, but then you can't experience love and affection from others if you don't allow yourself to be vulnerable.
That's why I don't allow myself to be
Yeah.
Because you try to hide yourself from people, they can find out about you.
Yeah, I like that. No, like the lack of fear of vulnerability is actually a very beautiful thing. At the same time, we have to learn how to put up our boundaries so people don't take advantage of our vulnerability.
Right. Well, I mean, for me, it's more like, yeah, you show the person, and if it's not reciprocated, seen as a weakness or something, of course.
Yeah. But I think that's a some people might see that as like a weakness, but I think that that's a strength. Yeah,
It's like,
to be like, hey, I'm ready to be vulnerable. Are you? Like, people will be like intimidated by that. Yeah. Okay. What else? What does everyone else think? How do you deal with war and chaos?
Try to like, well, I mean, my road, I try to make surroundings peaceful as I can, but that's not always the actual environment, you know, but I try.
What do you do? Like, what specifically do you
I
do?
pray. I mean, I always try to find like a space within myself where I can be calm because I know my emotions like can be very like, I don't know how to say, like, not emotional. Yeah, I guess emotional, but very like angry sometimes, very passionate. And if I don't have that sense of control within myself, then that's where it starts from within. Um, for me to have good relations with myself, with my partner, with my family, with my friends, because that is essentially what you can control. You can't control the world at a greater stage. So if you can find it within yourself to find some peace, like breathing, meditation.
Okay.
Find
Yeah.
5 minutes.
Yeah.
Everyone can spare 5 minutes a day, even if you say you're busy. You can. Just breathe, and that's what I say. You know how to breathe, right? That's when you can meditate. And then when you find that sense of that peace, and actually brings you joy too, to a greater level to everyone around. Everyone sees this, and how can they not help themselves, but also be peaceful and joyful with themselves?
Wow. You pretty much just summarized a lot of what I was hoping to discuss.
sorry.
No, that was great. That was great. Because we'll hopefully go deeper
Really deep into this.
and into a lot of those different things. So you brought up a few different things. Breathing meditations for you helps a lot, prayer, and just finding that time and space to work on yourself, because only then can you bring the best into your relationships, into your outside world. Yeah. Beautiful. So what works for everyone else?
Yeah, I'd say similarly, like just feel like someone asked me the other day because they're kind of not super religious, but just asking, they're like an aspiring agnostic, and they're like, okay, well, how can you taking out like spirituality, but like taking out the spiritual sense of things, what really like drives you to practice and things like that. And I said, well, I can feel a vast difference of, when I'm practicing and working on my internal self, like how that ripples outwards, in terms of like how the internal relates to the external. And yeah, I feel like that's the same thing for me. Just like a mix of what they were saying, just like feeling what happens and knowing the ways that helps me deal with it, if that's like meditation or journaling or prayer. But also specifically when thinking about the external world, especially right now, things going on, like I feel like that's been really kind of amping up my focus on prayer and just praying for the world. And maybe, I don't think I can really do much in that sense, but just having that intention of praying for people and just praying that there can be some, circumstances where people can be saved and things can turn out okay.
Beautiful. I appreciate the idea of not just praying like for yourself, but praying for others, and also understanding that not everyone's interested in prayer, because there's a lot of agnostics, understandably so in the world. So yeah, thank you for sharing. No one has to share. Emily, yeah.
Yeah, I can only echo what Swati just said, but I've not always done this. There's been a lot of trial and error, but when I feel crisis coming up inside of myself, whether that's invoked by some actual external crisis or an internal crisis or something more like in my relationships, the first thing that I've learned to do is accept all emotions that come up, whether it's anger or fear, bewilderment or anxiety, because those emotions are trying to say something. So giving them the space so that they can speak, essentially, so that they have a place to come, and they don't lead me towards distracting myself from the issue or doing something that's unhealthy. So giving the emotions the space, whatever they are, and then working through them and coming to the place of like, what do I need to learn? How can I grow? How can this soften my heart? Do I have control over this? What do I have control over? And then just finding an action plan, a healthy action plan after feeling all the emotions.
Beautiful. I like the idea of giving yourself permission to feel different emotions, and not just be like, I'm not supposed to be angry right now. And then you become more angry at yourself for being, or things like that. And then, but that being the first step of like accepting the emotions. And then the next step is like addressing it. And like, how can I now take some steps to work through this and process this in a healthy way? So beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. But anyway, we have a few people that came in late. We are discussing war and chaos. It's a very sweet meditative topic, right? But we're discussing, how do you deal with that? And everyone so far has brought up some like very healthy ways of dealing with it. Can I hear some examples of maybe some of the unhealthy ways that we deal with war and chaos?
I was actually having so that night with at the time it was just like really fast-paced job, like doing a lot of stuff at all hours at night. He was saying started twitching, and I previously for a job where my eye would twitch because I was so stressed. So it's kind of like that avoided. So it's you can't really avoid it. If you can't avoid stress, it's always kind of like creep up. So I feel like it's understanding that as well, no matter how much like you were talking about before, like, oh, I'm not supposed to be angry. But it's always going to come up and manifest in different ways in your life, whether it is physically or whether it is, emotionally, like it changes the way that you see things. It's understanding that, like, you can have that moment, but use it and realize it. Like me now, I know my eyes twitching, like, I'm having my long-term stress, like what can I start assessing, because I am clearly physically avoiding something and it is still coming out no matter what I am trying to do.
So like avoidance, but there's a lot of different ways that we will avoid. And you brought up the example of like your brother, how like you can bury yourself. One of the ways we can avoid is like burying ourselves in our work. Like, and there's, what are some of the other ways that we might avoid? Yeah.
I think my way is like numbing. It's exercise when you get numb.
Yeah, let's give some examples. How can we numb?
Okay, I mean, looking my for me is like overeating or eating salty.
Okay. Okay. pigging out, that's definitely something people go to. Stressed out, they go for the ice cream or the cake or the pizza, whatever, you know. Not that there's anything wrong with ice cream, cake, and pizza if it's done like in moderation and not as a like, you know, but yeah, and not as an escape. What are some of the other ways that we escape and numb and escape? Yeah.
For me, drinking booze.
Yeah.
Things like that.
It's a big
Like,
one.
you could do that type of stuff, but with like moderation and things like that. But there's a lot of people I know that every day they gotta smoke, and they don't get nothing done. Every day they gotta drink and they don't get nothing done.
Yeah.
So you really gotta watch out for that type of stuff. And yeah, food is also, you know,
Yeah. 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 So
it's like-
drugs, even just like recreational drugs, overeating, burying yourself in work. What's another one? Yeah. Yeah. Then it's like, I don't even want to know what's going on in the world. It's so crazy.
I mean,
Like,
it's like not watching movies, but that's more,
yeah.
there's a lot happening in the world, but then your personal chaos, and like just isolate yourself.
Mm,
You can hold yourself.
yeah. Yeah. Like if you're having relationship problems, it's like, okay, we're just not going to talk. Then it's like anything else anyone wants to bring up. Yeah.
Watching TV.
Oh yeah, it's a big one. That's like a huge. My spiritual teacher calls it like weapons of mass distraction.
TV first came out. and people-
I know, I'm saying, I'm gonna write that down.
Yeah.
Distraction.
Yeah. Well, it's like so many things in this world. It's not just like TV, but there's so many things that we use. I wouldn't say like all TV is just a distraction, but let's say most of it, you know, just like, you know, all pizza and ice cream isn't just to drown your sorrows and as an escape. Like sometimes it's to celebrate with a friend, you know, but yeah, it's a big one that a lot of it it's so common that we don't even see it as like it's normal, you know, that it's social media. I don't want to deal with the stresses of my own life. Let me see what other people are doing with their
But then
lives.
it's why it's easy to isolate yourself.
Yeah.
Because when you isolate, but I don't watch that TV, and so you feel like you're part of things, but you're not in all this chaos. You're trying to find peace, like, trying to be with yourself, but you can't get away from, I guess, being part of the community.
Yeah.
So it's like a,
We long for that community and society, and then we like try to juxtapose ourselves and imagine ourselves in some other situation, whether it be in some like what's it called, simulation there's through a video game or a movie or through social media. Yeah. So rather than just like addressing. Yeah, you guys brought up a lot of so I love how, because most of the people in this room of course we did start with kirtan, and that helps to put you in the heart space and in touch with yourself as the soul, and also helps to awaken like a deeper sense of self, a more healthy mindset, a more healthy heart set, you could say. So of course, naturally, you guys all started with the healthy ways in which you deal with chaos and war. And again, we're talking about war. There's the global level of war, and then there's also the battles that we fight day to day with the world that we live in and with the world within ourselves. So yeah, there's and then so many unhealthy ways that all fall into the category that, what was your name? Sammy, that's right. Okay, as Sammy brought up, of really of avoidance, or as Ari put it, numbing ourselves. It's like this numbing or avoidance, right? And so any of these things that we brought up, let me see, we brought up burying ourselves in work. We brought up overeating. We brought up taking shelter of intoxication, or movies or social media, things like that. Any of those things, do they actually help us deal with and address the problem, the problem?
So sometimes. Like philosophical pages and things. So a lot of people just look at that, they post inspiration.
All right.
More superficial things on Instagram.
Okay. Yeah. I appreciate that. So yeah, so that's a good example of how social media can actually be used for good if people are posting like inspirational, helpful things. Beautiful. Yes. I like that you found what other ways are there any other kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Any other ways that those things can actually help us to address and work on? Yeah.
It's about the spectrum of unhealthy and healthy, and so every single and like food, for example, if it's being used in a way of avoidance and actually hurting the body, then it's but food is it's a basic need, and so when it's really appreciated and meditated and like good for the body and the mind and the heart, it can be something that it helps you become healthy and have more energy to think clearly and process things, and also giving food as a gift to people, like healthy, nice things. And it can share the love.
Yeah. So we're not ruling out food as an absolute evil in this world. I'm glad. Thank you. Considering it is a basic necessity to live. But the difference between like overeating, overindulging, going to, and that's a whole big thing that I feel like we have to be very sensitive about, because there are a lot of people that have issues with eating disorders and histories like that. Yeah.
One thing I thought about is yes, it's good to be able to very healthy. At the same time, it's also really important to like not always try to force yourself to that's have like that how to be certain kinds of things. Sometimes it's not always to keep pushing yourself to be healthy. It takes something that takes time.
Yeah.
I actually noticed myself trying to lose weight a little bit rapidly. And we have been eating like a lot of junk food. I've been feeling better. Like sometimes when you deny yourself the calories too much, you really need. Some of these people with six pack and rock hard abs, they talk about all the time how they're miserable. So it's all about being happy.
Yeah. So finding that balance is important. Even trying to live a healthy lifestyle to an extreme is still an extreme. Like it can become an obsession and an escape in itself. That people, that's something that, people will go to both with in so many different ways, that because of we see there's so much war and chaos going on, we think, well, let me just control this one thing in my life. And that becomes an obsession, like whether it's how we eat or how we exercise or so many different things, when we become overly controlling to try to overcompensate for the war and chaos. is another thing, is another unhealthy way. So that's also an extreme. So we did talk a little bit in the beginning about some of the healthy ways that we can deal. I want us to explore that a little bit more and go deeper into so keep track of time here. What? But yeah, what can we actually do about it? Because sometimes it can be so overwhelming. The chaos, the conflict, the battles going on. And we do just want to escape. And we might escape for a bit of time through, burying ourselves in one form of numbing or another. But then eventually we have to come back and face whatever the reality is in our lives. And like Sammy mentioned, if we keep trying to avoid, it'll just come up. It'll continue to come up, because this is the law of, one of the laws of nature, is that we're being asked to work on certain things in this lifetime that we need to learn how to face, we need to learn how to work on, whether we want to or not. And the more difficult it is to work on, the more of a necessity it is that it's something that we need to work on, because it's something that we haven't learned from previous lifetimes. Whether or not you believe in reincarnation, there's this concept of reincarnation, and how we're meant to learn very important lessons. And what's easy for one person may be difficult for another. And that's okay, because we're all at different stages of our spiritual evolution. And that we're here to learn specific lessons. And those things that are like, keep coming back to us again and again, even if we try to avoid them, we should recognize, actually, and it should be, in one sense, almost like a relief that, like, okay, I can't avoid this. How can what can I do now going forward to deal with this war and chaos? So we can even start like on a bigger level. Oh, yeah.
So I was just good to deal with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you're talking about war at a global level, there isn't much
Yeah.
happening other than what you try to do to be at peace. Right? Meditate. But that's happening.
Yeah.
So it's not like you being meditating is preventing anything from happening. The world is not complete.
Mm-hmm.
You are, maybe that's not the right way of thinking about it. You're kind of ignoring it.
Mm.
And maybe it's not the right word, because maybe what you're supposed to do is you acknowledge it's happening and you're okay. But then that's not the right thing either. It's not that you should be okay with what's happening. So I just don't know what that balance is when it's like stuff that you can't control.
Mm-hmm.
So do you just meditate to do what? So that you don't get anxiety when you hear about it outside or use yourself calm? Is that okay just to be calm? So that's one thing for things that are global level, which you can't really control. But maybe, I'm sorry, I'm like talking.
No, I love your question, because
maybe you're supposed to actually acknowledge it, because that's how people build. They try to do something as a community, protesting. And then when it's at a personal level, I think it's hard sometimes to just
kind of, because it's people that are around you, so you feel disappointed that it's happening. Something that you're trying to take care of, but it's not propagated from others. So if you're just disappointed with people around you, because meditating again is going to help another person's attitude.
Yeah, but it can help your attitude.
Right, but then are you ignoring it?
No, that's a great question.
Acceptance that, especially on a global level, I don't really know if there's a right way. It's like, it's just a way, whatever way that is to that moment. It's acknowledging that and accepting that. Maybe it's one moment you're meditating, maybe it's another moment in the day you're drinking with friends, and then another moment in the day, you're protesting or resting or, making art or playing video games. I don't think there's, or again, it's like up to you, but I don't think there's like a right way. And I think that's kind of why we're all here, to kind of just explore the various ways that we can do things. And like maybe drugs isn't your way, but maybe like riding a motorcycle is, maybe nature is, maybe this is, and it's like there's kind of like all this, fluidity with it. And just being like, okay, there's fluidity with these things. There's not a right way or a wrong way. So I'm just gonna do the way that I feel grounded and authentic and not harming myself or others. And like, if those are your intentions, then it can't be that bad. Like that one song, it always comes up in my mind when I'm like living life. It's like, if you like it, like, it can't be that bad. I don't know what it's called, but I think about that lyric a lot, because what's good for you, or like for you to find what's right for you, it's gonna be super different. I think it's also that just like acknowledging like, hey, everyone's listening, like being a part of people where you're like kind of disappointed with them, it's like eating them at face value, where it's like, you know what, like what you're doing maybe isn't my version of what my best is, or what the best I think is for society, but it's their version, and I can't control that. So I can control my best and doing my best. I can't control you doing your best, and maybe your version is here, and maybe I think my version is here. But like, if you're doing your version, all right, like again, it's not like, it's not like the perfect answer, because that can also be put into different variables. Like, okay, what do you think about like? Just like mass murder, it's like, okay, you're doing your best now. It's very, I get that it cannot be compartmentalized into everything, but I do understand that. I usually get there because of Jewish, and like that's always been a topic in like my life. But it's just kind of
It's what you are.
That's it. And yeah, I like your perspective that there isn't a black or white answer, and that what's good for one person might not be good for somebody else, and what one person is capable of doing, somewhat we can't expect everyone to be capable of doing. At the same time, can you say that lyric again that you said that you You can. It was.
If I like it,
no,
If-
it's like
So it's something.
if it makes you happy, it can't be that bad.
But I want to challenge that statement, because
Yeah.
this is like a really common belief in this world. But some people find their happiness in raping children or in starting a war. Some people find their happiness in, so it actually is. I mean, it's not just whatever makes you feel good is good,
Yeah.
because there are things that maybe make us feel good that actually aren't good because it causes harm to others. That's like, then if it's something like, and you mentioned that, if something causes harm to others but it makes us feel good, then it's obviously actually not good. And then there's also things that are even more difficult to differentiate, that are on a subtle level, that make us feel good. They don't cause harm to others, but they cause harm to ourselves. And it might be on a physical level, it might be on a mental or emotional level, It might be on like a subtle spiritual level, that it might, and so in one sense, it actually is healthy to different. So I actually strongly disagree with that. And what I'm saying is this is also according to, I'm speaking according to the teachings of Bhakti, which to me really encompasses so much. It's not like a hard black and white truth, but it oftentimes the teachings of Bhakti are referred to the absolute truth because it encompasses such a wide scope of wisdom that is applied in different people's lives according to who they are, what their nature is, where you're at, you know. And so, and in one of the teachings in the Bhagavad Gita, where it talks about, it actually breaks down happiness into 3 categories. And it explains how happiness can be found in one of the 3 modes of material nature. And so I know some of you are familiar with the Bhagavad Gita, and for those of you that aren't, no problem, we're gonna break it down for you. So it's this beautiful ancient Sanskrit text. It's not just for any one religion. It just gives this basic universal spiritual knowledge that can be applied to anyone of any faith, including an agnostic. And so it explains how happiness in what's in Sanskrit is referred to as tamaguna or tamas, which is sometimes translated in the mode of in English to mean like the mode of ignorance, is referred to as like happiness that's found when one actually causes harm to others. And so there are people that look for that because that happiness comes through the false ego of this desire to have power over others. It's one of the ways people deal with things. It's like, well, I can't control this, but let me control this and let me find my happiness. Again, we started actually with this idea that there's nothing wrong with looking for happiness. That's the nature of this, the self of the soul is to seek pleasure and happiness. But then sometimes we can look for that in really destructive ways, right? Hitler was seeking pleasure, like, and by his way of seeking pleasure, gave some people that identified with him a sense of belonging, a sense of community, which a lot of us are looking for, and a sense of power over others, you know. And then it also brought intense suffering and harm, not just to the people, for many generations, and you know. So he's like the poster boy for happiness in tamas, in this mode of ignorance, of how one can in a very ignorant way look for happiness. But it's the same. You and me, we're all everyone's looking for it. The rats in the street are looking for happiness. The butterflies are looking for happiness. The trees are growing towards the sunlight. They're looking for happiness. You know, we're all looking for it, but there's different ways. And then there's happiness in the mode of passion. That's Rajaguna. That's explained. Passion. We think of passion as oftentimes, especially in New York City, as a positive thing. It's like, what's your passion? I'm gonna run after this. I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna make the big thing. But the Sanskrit word rajas refers to a passion that is very selfish. I'm gonna get what I want. I'm gonna work my way. I'm gonna look for my happiness as like what instant gratification type of thing. It's like, I'm gonna get this, I'm gonna get that, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. And again, it comes down back to the false ego of wanting to achieve and it not necessarily causing as harm to others, but still this idea of looking for happiness in ways where one is still exploiting the resources of this material world and exploiting others. Sometimes it can be mutual exploitation. It's like, well, I'm not causing harm to you, but I'm getting something out of you and you're getting something out of me, so that we can both, try to get something. So we can both try to seek our pleasure that's temporary and fleeting and doesn't actually satisfy the heart, doesn't actually quench the thirst of the heart that is looking for deeper, more meaningful, lasting pleasure, right? And then there's what's referred to as sattva, or happy, and in sattva, or the mode of goodness, one seeks pleasure by doing things that not only benefit us, but also benefit others. So, remind me of Marta, I think. I'm really bad with names, guys, sorry. So Marta brought up, she likes to find pleasure through helping others. That is very characteristic of someone who is looking for pleasure in the mode of goodness. It's like, how can I make a difference in someone else's life? How can I bring happiness to others? So that's very much, so in one sense, we're all looking for happiness, but we look for it in different ways. And sometimes it starts wars when we're looking for. So I want to go back a little bit to this question, to this topic of what can you do about it? And I didn't forget your question. I'm gonna wait a little bit for it to simmer, and then, because it's something the answer to your question was something that I was actually hoping to kind of end with, so it makes me really happy that you asked that question now. So I would love to hear some other idea, like how else do you deal with, let's say, war on a global level? Yes.
Try to make your as high as you can, as possible. We're all interconnected through white spaces and things like that. It's been scientifically proven recently through electromagnetic signals. So if you change yourself, you'll change your environment. So as long as you work on yourself and you work to spread that awareness through Instagram, that's how you deal with worldwide conflict. We all need the same thing. So.
I love that you brought that up, this concept that, okay, maybe we can make a difference by working on ourselves and trying to, you worded it as like raising our own frequency, something like that. That's how you said it? Yeah. Yeah, that's something that I was going to bring up if nobody else did. That's really important, that we work on our own stuff with the idea of, because if you're trying to tell people what's wrong with the world, but you're part of the problem. Yeah. Then, so one really important thing is to work on ourselves, because the reality is you may not be able to have a direct impact on the leaders in this world that are deciding whether or not to push the big red button that sends a nuclear missile somewhere. You may be in that position. I don't know if anyone in this room is in that position, unless there's some like great, powerful world leaders in here that I don't know about. But we do all have a circle of influence to some extent. And it may be small, it may be large, it may be whatever it is. And that's like a lot of things, that's like a big thing that, a lot of people are like, especially the younger generations, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be an influencer. Well, that's cool, but like everyone's influencing people in some way. What do you want your influence to be? Like, it's like, people are aspiring to influence others. And usually it's like talking about social media or whatever, but
It's like a byproduct of social media thing.
yeah, what do you want your influence to be? Is it so that you can be the center of the universe?
Usually it's the kind of people that would be being sponsored by like
Yeah.
a bunch of different brands. And I've seen this where you want to try it out, right? Because it's a celebrity that we really love. That's you know, this drug, this item, and it's like it's just a material thing, you know.
Yeah.
Like if you really want to, you could get it, right? You get it, you try it out. Cool. What's next?
Yeah.
You know.
Happiness is the mode of passion.
Yeah.
Okay, what's next? What's the next thing? So good for you. Self-control.
Nah.
Self-control. Good. So yeah, so we're all influencers, and even if you don't have a social media account, you're an influencer in some way. But the real question is, what kind of influence are you putting out there in the world? Are you trying to? Yeah, exactly. Do you want to speak a little bit more about that?
I have come to obviously I can't control anything other than myself. So if I want to be a light and I want to be a light, maybe I'll impact others, and then my life will make their life a little easier, or they'll be able to be a light. And it's kind of a ripple effect. So that's what the last thing I say is,
Beautiful.
Get it to your burden, just be that your design. You
It's
know,
okay.
and that's
It's a real thing.
Day, you could be a joy, or you know, so it's the same thing at work or wherever you are. You can choose who you want to show up as.
Mhm.
Show up as a person like that. Of course, it's good.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah. So this desire to be a force of good, or to be even an instrument of good, is
A light influencer.
a light influencer. I like that. Yeah, I like that. Yeah. So that's a big thing. I wanted to talk a little bit more about this because it can be. I feel like we're all on the same page, and by all means, you can challenge me if you're not, because I do like challenges. But I feel like we're all on the same page in terms of, let us become the best versions of ourselves so that we can understand that we do have we can spread some influence, and hopefully that will spread and spread and spread and make its way to our world leaders. And you know, and if not, then we still can continue to be forces of good, recognizing that, well, the soul's eternal. War is going to happen. Death is going to happen. We don't want to encourage it to happen, but it's a reality of this world. And to learn the lessons that we're meant to learn and come closer to our supreme spirit and the reality of who we are in connection with that supreme spirit. And so I feel like we're all on the same page about that, like this. Okay, so we don't have, I feel like let's take it to the next level of like, what does that mean? Because it's not just whatever feels good and whatever you think is necessarily good is going to be good. Hitler really thought that World War II was really trying to purify his race and make the world a better place. Like he was coming from that, you know. But it starts with it starts with understanding, you know, what are the qualities of the self or the soul versus what are the qualities of the false ego, the false self, the ego that wants to control others or have power over others. And sometimes the ego can even creep in and be like, well, I'm going to be a great light in this world. And yeah. But we should want that. We should want to have make a positive difference in the world.
It's rather than crushing people.
Yes. Yeah. But it can even, I'm just saying the false ego can even creep into the mind and the heart of someone that is trying to do good, of thinking, oh, well, I'm so good. You want to say something?
Yeah, so I thought maybe like a key difference is that if you want to work towards good, then it's toward the good itself versus if it's toward the ego. It could look very similar. I think the key difference is attachment. It's what you get that you're not attached to even that outcome of that. Then that's working towards good because you're in the process in itself. You know, be detached from the process of working towards good. Right? Whereas like attachment has to do with ego. It's like, then you're saying I want something, like you said, like there's control, there's power. Even like the idea, like I have to do good in itself is like attachment.
You've read the Bhagavad Gita? Okay. Just because the concept that you're talking about is discussed in a couple of chapters in the early part of the Gita, referring to karma yoga, the form of yoga of acting with detachment and acting for the good of others, the good of yourself, and especially acting for the good towards the Supreme Spirit. And that is done with detachment from the results, that you do the right thing, not just because it's the right thing to do, but you do the right thing because it's the right thing to do, and as an act of selfless service, and specifically even on a higher level when it's done for that which is eternal, not just like temporary, and meaning for like that higher source, the higher power, whatever you want to call it, from your different traditions. In the Bhakti tradition, we like to talk about Krishna. Krishna being that beautiful, wonderful, sweet higher power. And but you can refer to that in whatever way you want. Yeah. So thank you for sharing. Yeah. Any other comments on that?
I don't know. It's something that might be a little bit unrelated, but how do you personally react to like the test of the universe? Because I see when I want something like a goal or something like that, the universe will always put certain things in place to make sure that I really want that. It puts a lot of like bumps on the road and things like that. I'm just wondering how do you react to it?
Beautiful question. Yeah. So one of the ways that I personally react to the tests of what you refer to as the universe, I'll talk about in connection to the universe even being, this is just one little universe. There's a lot of universes out there, and they're all coming together under one beautiful source, you know? So even beyond this universe, I like to pray to the source of all the universes and be like, look, you got the universes, you figured out all the universes, right? I've got this tiny little problem. I don't want to bother you with my little problems and all, but still, like, if you can control all the universes, you can help me understand how to work towards the, and towards this goal. And if this is even a goal that I should be working towards, or if you're trying to point me in a different direction. Because sometimes we might have our goals, we might have our plans. There's a really funny saying. I know the G word can be like a little bit sensitive because we've got a lot of agnostics in the world, which is totally, I was for many, many years an agnostic, hardcore. So, yeah, so the idea of like God is, especially when so many different ideas of God have been kind of like imposed on us but so we can just say higher power. There's a beautiful saying that if you want to make God or the higher power, like laugh, tell him your plans, like
My dad said
I'm going to do this, I'm gonna do that, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do this. Right. And so sometimes it's not that like, it's not all about like us achieving our goals, because again, we should be putting our energy into doing something because it's the right thing to do. And because it's for the pleasure of that higher power, for the pleasure of others in a selfless way. And then be detached from the results, which is much easier said than done. I will acknowledge that. And that's like, if you want to get into that, then you should take our Bhagavad Gita course because there's a course called Living the Gita where it really gets deep into how do you live that truth.
It seems like the more things I'm attached to, the more it ends up happening. Because over here in New York City, it's a lot of responsibility that you can require. But with that comes like a lot of pain and a lot of struggle.
Yeah. You can do your responsibility without being attached to the results of your response. Like you do your duty, you do your work. That's like so much. That's really the essence of the teaching of chapter 4 in the Gita. In chapter 3 is like you do your duty as an act of service, and then the results aren't yours to enjoy. Whether it's difficult. It's something that needs to be worked on. So. And then actually getting a little bit deeper into kind of how we work on ourselves in the purification of our own hearts, because there's a part of us that wants to do good for others, that looks for happiness and doing what's healthy for ourselves and doing what's healthy for others. And then there's also a part of us that will be like, I don't feel like dealing with it right now. I want to escape in any number of the ways that we listed off or more, And so my spiritual teacher likes to bring up this analogy a lot of the good dog and the bad dog. I think he got it from like a Native American actually teaching. And, but the teaching it's a pretty universal, it could be understood anywhere, that within each of us, there's what could be referred to as the good dog or the bad dog. Like the barking that's like, just don't worry about it. Just bury your head in the sand and go eat a bunch of food or watch a bunch of Netflix or just go yell at people in the street or whatever, there's that bad, like saying, don't worry, you can't do anything about it. You're not going to be able to affect it anyways. You're not good enough. You're whatever. Like, just forget about it. And then there's the other part of the good dog that's barking. Woof, woof, woof. You can make a small work on yourself. Do some healthy things for yourself, like that. And so really our ability to influence others in a positive way, again, goes back to this point of working on ourselves. And that means feeding the good dog, because whichever dog you feed becomes strong. Like it's the nature of the, if the bad dog is barking at you and it's getting on your nerves and you're like, fine, I'll give in, I'll feed you. You feed that dog, but what happens, because you're like, you just want it to shut up, and then you feed it. And then it shuts up for a little while, it starts barking at you. But the problem is that you just fed it, you gave it more. So this is going back to this idea of how we numb ourselves. We try to numb ourselves, and it's like a temporary escape from the problem, but it brings us back to this, but you're feeding the bad kind of habits that we have, our negative habits. And it's not actually empowering you. It's not helping you grow. And so then the focus is on, how do I feed the good dog? And how do I actually start to starve that bad dog? This, the idea of starving dogs, I know because some of you really love your dogs. Just remember, this is an analogy. Don't starve your dogs, because we love you dogs. But the idea of like, we want to fuel our higher selves. You can also just think of it in terms of our higher self and our lower self. The lower self being our conditioned self. The lower self that identifies with those lower modes of nature that we brought up. The mode of ignorance and this passion. I gotta get this. So when we feed that higher, that good dog, then it gives more strength to us. Then we become more illuminated with, and then it becomes our good habits become stronger, and then our good habits become a reality of who we are, and then that emanates into the world around us, whether it's the people we meet on the street or the people we're interacting with in the internet, whatever, and so that's very powerful. And I wanted to address a few. Oh, good, we have a little bit more time. A few of the main things that come through the false ego that really feed our bad dog. The first one is greed. And these are like, I think it's maybe related. It's actually seen throughout many different religions that there are negative. There's like this okay. I don't know exactly what all of those are. I'm not from I didn't grow up in a Christian tradition, but and then it's also there in Buddhism and in Islam that there's like certain qualities that just like aren't healthy for us. And so in the Vedas, in the Bhagavad Gita, it's also explained very clearly, like there are things that are unhealthy for us. There are qualities. And so I'm gonna briefly go through some of these qualities and how we can combat them. And like some actual tools, like when they come up, when you notice that bad dog is barking, because I think a lot of you are very aware, you're very conscious people, obviously. So sometimes we don't even know, like we just like the anger takes us over. Some people are lack so much self-awareness, they don't even know when they're angry. But like, I think all of you have enough self-awareness that you can acknowledge, oh, okay, I'm feeling pissed off right now, or oh, okay, a little bit, so it starts with that self-awareness, that comes from a little bit of mode of goodness. At least a little mode of goodness has to be mixed in there for us to be aware. And so greed, as you can see, is actually the thing that is fueling all of our wars. Greed, lust, envy, anger. It's like, I want to control, I want power. This is all coming through the false ego, and it manifests in these different ways. And that's what starts wars, whether it's on a global level or whether it's on like a very small level, or even just within ourselves, right? It's like, it happens all around us. And so we'll start with a few of these different things. So when you observe yourself feeling a little greedy, whether it's like the greed and lust are actually very similar things. Like the lust, not just referring to like sexual, which it manifests in that way, but it's like the lust for like, I need this, so in that way, like, I don't care what it takes to get it. I need it. I don't care if it hurts other people for me to get it. I need it. I need to rule this other country. I need to be the best in my category of whatever it is that I want to be the best at, so this idea of greed, when we see greed manifesting in ourselves, then we should acknowledge it. It starts with acknowledging, not running away, not bearing it, not numbing ourselves, but saying, oh, okay, maybe I got a little bit of false ego influencing me. I don't want to be a negative influence, because if you got the false ego influencing you, then you're going to be a negative influence on others, right? So then the best tool for greed is, okay, you're thinking, how can I get what I want? Then to actually force yourself to do the opposite, not to not get what you want, but to change what you want and be like, all right, let me give in charity. It's like an obvious thing, how to combat greed, because greed is all about how can I get more and more and more and more and more? I'm never satisfied with however much I get. Let me find satisfaction by giving in charity to to something that's worthy of charity. And also by doing selfless service for others, because greed fuels us. It's all about me. I'm in the center. Instead of put yourself out of the center and do some selfless service, right? And another big one is pride. Sometimes we think, especially in America, pride is advertised as a very healthy thing, right? Proud to be an American. I always thought that was a little weird growing up. Grew up here. Boring, cold-blooded American. But actually pride, again, puts oneself in the center, and it's like, if it's coming through the false ego of pride, of how can I be better than others, then along with that means how can I push others down? Then pride can manifest through so many different things. Even like we were talking about, how we can even be a little bit proud of how we do so much good to make the world a better place. That's one of the subtle. You have to be careful about that. It sneaks in all different ways. And one of the best ways to combat pride is through gratitude. Because if you're grateful for what you've been given, for the abilities that you have, then you realize, oh, I have nothing to be proud of. It wasn't mine in the first place. Somehow I was born with this ability or that ability, or I worked really hard to get this ability or that ability. And but to recognize that our abilities actually aren't just our own. They can be taken away from us just like that. So gratitude for the source, or for that higher power of where our abilities are coming from. Then one can act with confidence, but without pride. And that's a powerful thing. And then you can have so much more of an influence, because it comes down to this point. And this is hopefully an answer to, what was your name? What was it? Jignasha. Beautiful. So hopefully kind of an answer to your question is that if we acknowledge that higher source, that higher power, then it can empower us to do things that we're not even capable of doing on our own. Because how much of an influence can we actually have on the world? We do have an influence on the world. Can we really make world leaders decide to all share cake and flowers and give each other hugs and shake hands and live happily ever after in world peace? I don't think I have. I know for a fact I don't have the ability to do that. But if we become the best versions of ourselves in connection with that higher power, then we can become empowered to do things that are like way beyond what we ever thought we were capable of, actually. And one way or other increase our realm of influence. Because if we're just interested in influencing others, then you actually won't have as much of an impact in terms of the depth of impact. You may have, it's not about like the number of followers you have, it's about the depth of impact that you have. And you may have a wider influence and a more depth of impact when you take shelter of that higher power. And so that pride is very easily combated with this idea of gratitude and just acknowledging where you're getting your power from in the first place, where you're getting your abilities from in the first place. And then this envy is like, I want what you have. Like, I'm not okay with you. I need it for myself. And if it means me taking away from you what you have so that I can have it for myself, then good, because this is again like this something that's even taught. I actually have my master's in education, although for health reasons I couldn't go into teaching. But when I was doing my training in my master's, I was actually reading a lot of like the school books, and because I did like an internship at a school, working with kids. I love kids, but I was again and again really disappointed by what I was seeing in the public school system that I was working in. That like there's all these like subtle ways in which they're actually trying to encourage kids and teach them, train them from a young age to be envious of one another and to think of ways, how can you get to the top? Even if it means putting someone else down. There was like a cute little storybook about it. And I was like, are you serious? Are the other teachers not seeing what like the lesson of this story is with these? The lesson of the story was, well, even if you take advantage of others, but you get to the top, then do it. And I was like, this is what we're teaching kids in schools? What? This is what's being taught so much, like, what?
Kindergarten for Harvard students.
Yeah. No, but this is just like public school system. And this is what we're taught, actually. But it's if you're only thinking what's going to be beneficial to you, then that's what causes world wars. It starts with this little seed of we should encourage each other to be envious. We should encourage each other to be greedy for power. And then we get upset and pissed off when world wars are happening, or when any wars, or when anything gets in the way of what we see as something that brings us joy. Then it becomes our enemy, right? And so a lot of this, another one of the things that's mentioned is how we are put into illusion. We don't see the reality of things. In the way of combating this lower quality of illusion, of not seeing the big picture, of just looking at our own little world, is by cultivating knowledge, real knowledge, universal truths and especially wisdom. There's a difference between knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge is understanding facts and figure, and knowledge means actually a way that one of our teachers, Srila Prabhupada, defines knowledge as being able to differentiate between what is matter and what is spirit, actually. And so just having that basic knowledge, which for many people is not basic, actually. And then, but even more than knowledge is wisdom, which means actually having realization of the truth, right? So one of the basic foundational Bhakti 101 teachings is you're not the body, you're the soul. I'm sure most of you have heard that before. And so, but there's a difference between thinking about that and being like, oh yeah, that's true. Like I'm really not just like this flesh and blood and skin and bones. I'm something so much more than that. I'm the life that inhabits the body, right? But there's a difference between understanding it philosophically and actually living it and knowing it to be true at the time of death. When you stub your toe, when you get hurt, when you look in the mirror to really understand I'm really not this body. So to cultivate wisdom is the wisdom and knowledge is the way that you combat illusion, because otherwise we are illusioned by false ideals of what gives us happiness. And then we just like end up running after temporary happiness, because again, we are programmed to look for happiness, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it's just how we look for it is what's important. And then just really quickly, we'll end with how we combat anger is by acceptance. We're angry because things aren't going the way that we want them to go, or we're not getting what, so to accept the situation that we're in, to accept, oh yeah, I'm not the supreme controller. Oh yeah, I'm not the center of the universe. Oh yeah, maybe I'm meant to learn something from this. Like maybe so acceptance acceptance is a lot easier to do with knowledge and wisdom, of course, when you understand the bigger picture. And then combating lust, or the desire to, again, lust can be connected with greed, of like this insatiable need to like possess something. But lust also is like this insatiable need for just like physical pleasure, and identifying with the pleasures of the body can happen by serving the master of the senses. Meaning in Sanskrit, one of Krishna's names is Krishikesha, which means the master of the senses. So by engaging our senses and offering selfless service to that source of our senses, then it helps us to understand, okay, I'm not just the pleasure that I can get out of these senses, out of my eyes, my tongue, my ears, my genitals, my mouth, my skin, my leg. The pleasure that we're seeking is so much more than what we can get just out of our gross material body or out of our false ego. And so by serving that supreme source with love and devotion, and recognizing, hey, I'm not the center of it, then naturally we become we become purified of the need to seek pleasure through our bodies, through our senses only. So that's a little bit I wanted to talk about, how do we actually fight that battle? How do we deal with the wars, the battles all around us? And it starts by taking a stand and saying, I'm going to fight my inner battles. I'm going to address the things that come up, the lessons that I'm meant to learn. I'm not going to run away from them. You can still run away from them temporarily. If you want to eat a little cake, watch a little movie, whatever, you can do those things, but they're going to be there waiting for you when you get back. And so whenever you're ready for them, and the sooner the better, you address to be a spiritual warrior. It's a beautiful book series written by one of my spiritual teachers called the Spiritual Warrior series. And he talks about a lot of these things in his books in much more detail of how to really strengthen your higher self. And in that way, you can humbly go through this world with great confidence and be beautiful light to all those around you. So thank you for coming. I was really, really happy to hear everyone's discussion and thoughtful points. I think a lot of you are already very elevated souls, and I'm grateful to have had your association. We have a couple of minutes if there's any more comments or questions. Yeah.
Then is it like the whole world like false reality, like you take the banyan tree and now like you might be living in false reality?
Say that again.
Isn't like, well, if you think about the banyan tree analogy, the banyan tree reflection, and like the whole world they currently living in like false reality until like you achieve but actually that's the truth and that's the life. So then everything that is technically.
Yeah, but we still have to live in this world. I mean, this world is temporary, and the things that we sometimes make out to be like huge problems are actually not. Especially when you pull out the lens and look at the bigger picture, which can be hard for us to do. But so in one sense, this world is temporary, but it's not false, actually. This world does exist, but it's temporary, So the temporary nature of it doesn't mean that it doesn't matter what we do, because it does matter, because we're in a temporary world, because we're meant to learn permanent lessons. And those lessons are learned through how we deal with this temporary world. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a dream, right? Like a dream there.
It is. This is all. Yeah. In one sense, it's all a dream, but in another sense, you have real responsibility. In a dream, like the material world is often compared to a dream, but in your dreams, you don't have karmic consequences for the actions that you do in your dreams. There are real consequences to what you do in this material world. But in a dream and in this world at the same time, it's where your consciousness goes, that you develop to certain attachments to either feeding a bad dog or a good dog, in the same way. Yeah. Any more discussion, or what was your name? Sorry. Jignasha. Did I answer your question, or did you want to restate it? Because I don't know if I remember the whole
No, I think
question.
you did. I think the whole point of like, whatever you do, keep the higher whatever in mind, right? Because that will, I think, enable you to kind of feel a little bit more, not powerful, but that frequency level. So maybe you can make a positive impact to others around you.
Yeah.
This kind of my takeaway.
Good.
It's what you do within you, but if you're able to elevate it, then that could potentially make a positive impact.
Yeah.
We'll tell you that.
Yeah. And don't ever think that you don't have an impact, because then you're going to just have a negative impact.
Right.
Well,
That's why I
not
wanted to-
necessarily, but yeah, not necessarily.
Yes.
But sometimes people think that they won't have much of an impact because they're just really humble. But if we think, oh, it doesn't matter, I'm not gonna be able to do anything anyways. I might as well just feed my bad dog.
I
Then,
guess
you
it
know,
starts with small things and kind of let me honest, and sometimes we're harder on ourselves. Cause like, if I can't get to this point, then sometimes I don't do anything. So I'm at
Yeah.
extremes instead of trying to work in the middle.
yeah. And
So
it
either
starts,
All or nothing.
it doesn't
But
have to be all or
it doesn't have
nothing.
to.
That's what, you just feed your good dog a little bit more and you start feeding the bad dog a little bit less. It doesn't, because sometimes we'll be like, okay, I'm gonna completely
Yeah.
stop feeding the bad dog. I'm just gonna like give the good dog. And then you're like, oh, but the bad dog is barking so loud, I can't take it. And then, so you just a little bit more and a little bit less. Yeah. And eventually you'll get there.
Or even if you don't, it's okay, as long as you know you're not making a negative impact to others.
That does help. Yeah. But the idea of it's encouraged on the spiritual path that one actually have confidence that eventually you will get there. And it may not be in this lifetime.
And that's the thing, because we're not the instant gratification, because even your one lifetime is long.
Yeah.
So maybe you'll see it 50 years later, but if you don't see it, then is it really making a change?
Yeah.
So, and that's, I think, yeah. That I think I like picked up.
Great.
You just have to keep doing small things.
Keep doing them. That's why actually it's so powerful to have a daily spiritual practice. Sometimes people like just immerse themselves in a big spiritual retreat, you know, and then they come back and that was amazing, that was great, I loved it. Not that there's anything wrong with doing spiritual retreats, but if you do that, but then you don't have like some sort of regular practice where you connect very deeply with yourself as being more than just this mind and body and ego, where it's not just a belief system that I believe I'm the soul, but it's like you actually deeply connect every day with who you are as the self. And then that makes a huge difference in the scheme of things to just do that. And that's why in our Bhakti tradition, we do a lot of chanting, and a daily practice of chanting is so powerful. So powerful, whether it's 1 minute, 5 minutes, 2 hours, you know, whatever you have time for. It makes a difference to sit down. And the breathing meditation really calms the mind. It's actually a scientific thing, that, like deep breaths, and it moves the prana within the body, and it really helps to calm the mind. It doesn't necessarily help you to understand the higher power though. It calms us very much though. But by chanting, then it gives you a direct connection and a direct experience of the self and of God and of God. What, you know, how you put that big thing into one little word, you know, that, but and then it's not just about like, it gives you this incredible strength of knowledge and wisdom just by coming in touch with the self as the soul, to sit and spend time every day deeply connecting with who you are and with your higher power. And as a natural side effect of connecting with your higher self, then our lower self it's not as greedy for attention. Because
and maybe
yeah.
it goes to this point with connect with yourself, even if it is the dream or none of this exists, that's okay. So you're able to get into maybe what you think is there.
Mm.
Which
Yeah.
is your soul.
Yeah. Yeah. But even going beyond connecting with what we think is there is actually learning what is there. And that happens through, you know, it starts with just experimenting with what could be an incredible spiritual process of self-awakening. You know, there's a lot of things out there there's a lot of things out there. There's a lot of processes and different gurus and stuff like that. So it starts with experimenting and finding that which actually helps you to manifest those better qualities, those higher self qualities, and actually that the process that awakens not just a belief, but an experience of the self and an experience of the higher power, an experience of the beauty and the sweetness and the kindness of that higher power. So, yes. Thank you. I loved your question. Your question made me really happy. I was like, yes. I was like, I love when people ask really important questions. All right, we are over time. Sorry, Emily. I went 6 minutes over.
Tulsi, Rani, and thank you everyone for being here and making the time out of your week for 2 hours or even more if you want to stay for lunch to come here. New York is a microcosm of the world. So within the microcosm of New York, this little microcosm of when we speak, love thy neighbor and love others, we're actually doing it. So thank you so much for being here and bringing your heart and sharing in community. Processing and figuring out how to connect closer to ourselves and each other. So a few notes are that you've got these little cards on your seat. One shows you about an awesome podcast that happens every single day you can tune into. Another one is Porta Bhakti Center. You can go online and see a lot of different offerings that we have, education, kind of like soul talks, different classes online, in-person programs like Kirtan on Thursday night. And then the other one just tells you about the mantra that we started with. So take these with you, explore the website, see what might be beneficial for you. And then the next part of the program, if anybody is welcome, anybody is free to stay, you're welcome. We're having lunch in here. So what we'll do to transition into that is we'll just put all of these items towards the back elevator. The green chairs, the black chairs will fold into here. And then once we've got it all set up, we can join in a circle and start eating lunch together.
Yay.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank
Thank you.
Stick around.